Okay, in the interest of starting on time, we're going to have everybody try and find a seat here quick. Okay, I think the doors in the center are open, so if you have to leave in and out, if you could use those doors. The doors that are closed, actually, when you shut them, bang pretty loudly, so try not to use those doors. And if you have any electronic devices, if you could silence those, that would be lovely. Okay, I think everybody is finally in the auditorium. I'd like to welcome everybody. My name is Lindsay Merkel, and I am a parent in the district and part of the volunteer group known as the Liaison Committee, who puts on the Parenting with Vision series. I actually have kids that are out of middle school finally, 2 in college and 2 in the high school. But I wanted to welcome all of you and thank you for coming to Transitioning to the Middle School, a Parent's Guide. Tonight's forum is provided to give you information to assist your student in navigating the middle schools by addressing common concerns and answering your questions. So wanted to know if everybody was able to pick up a handout when you came in. And if you didn't, can you raise your hand and we'll try and get you a handout. Everybody got this? Okay. Find a seat and we'll get you a handout. I don't know where my assistants are, so hopefully we can get you a handout quick. And then did you all get a card for questions and a pencil? And or do you have a writing utensil? Everybody? Okay. If you attended the resource fair and have some further questions, the contact information is on the second page of your handout. And then in addition to that, there's some information on the middle school athletics and activities for your student to begin exploring. There's also a list of acronyms and terms that are commonly used in the middle school, which you may want, which you may hear from the panel today that's also listed in your packet, okay? We're going to start tonight. Ooh, I see my assistants. Can you guys bring some extra packets? We're going to start tonight with a short video prepared by a group of 6th graders to introduce you to the middle school, and then we're going to move on to our panel discussion with our district specialists. And our panel is over to my left over here. We have Mr. Paul Paetzel, who is a principal at East Middle School, Miss Jill Jaeger, who is a 6th grade teacher at Central, Miss Annie Roeder, who is a counselor at Central, Mr. Corey Knutson, who is an 8th grade teacher at East, and Ms. Rose Lee, who is a police liaison officer at West Middle School. So after all of the panel discussion, we will open up the audience for questions during the presentation. If you come up with questions and would like to have those addressed, please put them on the cards that we gave you at the beginning when you got your packet. And we will collect those cards and begin the question and answer part of the session at that time and try to address as many questions as possible. So we will start with the video.
Thank you, Lindsay, very much. We have some technical difficulties with the video, so we may hold that off to the end, or you may not have a chance to see that. So we'll probably post that somewhere at some point. But
okay.
Is that right?
Well, we'll halt on the video. One small statement before you guys get started. So how many of you have been in the district and have had your kids in the elementary schools in the district? Okay, how many of you are new to the district? Okay, so you guys have all been in our wonderful elementary schools and you've all developed great relationships with your teachers, and your kids love their teachers and they remember Mrs. Smith from kindergarten and Mrs. Jones from 3rd grade, and they're just super attached to their elementary school. And middle school seems really daunting and scary, and it's only 3 years, and how are we gonna be attached to those people for only 3 years? And there's so many teachers and so many classes at a time, and it's really not scary. And I will tell you that all 4 of my kids went to East, all 4 of my kids had Mr. Knutson, and all 4 of my kids, even the ones that are in college, come back and visit him all the time. They, on break, will go and visit him. My 2 high school students go every Tuesday afternoon and torture the poor soul and bother him all the time. But they do develop those same tight bonds with those middle school teachers. And I'm sure, and I know I've heard Ms. Jaeger's name all through the baseball fields and basketball courts and dance classes as well. So don't worry, your kids are gonna develop those same tight bonds and attachments in middle school as well, and the high school when you get there, but we're not gonna worry about that yet. Okay, I'm gonna let the panel start.
Thank you, Lindsay. I appreciate that. Again, my name is Paul Patesel, principal at East Middle School. First, I think Lindsay already established that you are, for the most part, parents out there. I have one final question for you, though, is how many of you have a 5th grader at home? Okay, that's most of you. How many of those 5th graders are the oldest child in your home? So that's another question. Yeah. Okay, so that's good. If you didn't raise your hand, the people who were raising their hand, if you looked around and see someone that didn't raise their hand, they're a great resource for you. You can ask them about a parent perspective on that. So thank you for being here tonight. We feel this is a really important meeting. My role tonight is really to kind of kick this off, give you a broad overview of what middle school is all about, and then I'll hand it over to the experts here to my left, and they will tell you the details of the situation. So to start off, we have really 2 parts of the middle school experience that we want you to think about tonight. And the first is you have these kids at home that in the next 3 years are going to experience a really incredible transformation. And it will happen. It's happened to all of us. We've all lived through it. And so I think you know sort of what we're talking about. So there are, those are what we would call kind of the internal factors of early adolescence. The second thing that we're going to ask you to think about tonight is in what context are they going to have those changes or those transformations? So how do we structure a middle school to accommodate these changes and make them as successful as absolutely possible? So we have, if I can get the clicker to work. I'm going to hand it over to the professional. So while the slides will be coming up, I want you to think of 5 aspects of your child right now. First, I want you to think about what's going to happen to your child in the next 3 years physically. Physically, how are they going to change and transform in the next 3 years? Second, think about how they're going to change in their thinking. So intellectually, how are they going to change? Third, how are they going to emotionally change? What's going to happen to their emotions in the next 3 years? Fourth, How are they going to interact with people? What's going to be the social changes that they will experience? And fifth, one of the really kind of exciting ones is how are they going to change in terms of their ethics? Ethically, how are they going to change? How do they determine what is right, what is wrong, what is good, what is bad? So I want you to think about that for about 20 seconds or so. Just reflect within yourself. What kind of changes do you anticipate your child is going to go through the next 3 years in those 5 categories? And I want you to think of as many different things for each of those 5 categories as possible. So about 20 seconds, we'll just sit in silence for a second. I want you to think about that. One of the things that you get used to as a teacher is something called wait time. And it's incredibly uncomfortable sometimes for people in groups where you expect us to be talking continuously, to sit in silence. But we wanted you to think about that and have that in the forefront of your mind. So now I want you to turn to the person next to you, whether you know them or not, and share with them, what do you know? What are the things that are going to be happening in the next 3 years with your child? Go ahead. All right, we'll just finish that last comment and come back together as a group. Thank you very much. So the exercise that we just went through there is something that we call in education priming. So it's really getting your, everything you know, all your prior knowledge about early adolescence into your working memory. So you're thinking about that right now. Now, if we were say a course in adolescent development, we would have you share all those things. We'd put them into categories. We talk about that. But for today, the purpose of that activity was just to get you to think about your child and how they're going to change in the next 3 years. So this next part of this, and this is, again, this introduction, you'll get more information about this as we move down the panel. But in what context? How is middle school, how do we structure that, and how is it different than elementary, and how is it different than high school? So the first thing I want to talk about is 5 things that all schools think about. Number 1, we want to make sure the environment of the school is safe. So we are very fortunate in Wayzata that we put a lot of dollars and support from the community to make sure that our facilities are safe. So we want to make sure that they're up to date, that we have buildings that are clean and maintained. We make sure that air quality is of the highest quality. We make sure that temperature is controlled, and we have an environment in which learning can take place. We also make it safe through our practices. So we have, as you know, in the elementaries, some secure entrances. Not everyone can walk into the building during the school day. So those are some practices we do in the spirit of safety. We also create an environment that is safe in terms of emotion. So we want to make sure that they feel safe when they walk in the building. And that's where we institute things like positive behavior interventions and supports. We have common expectations for all. We make sure staff is out monitoring all the common areas. And so those are some practices that we implement for safety. We'll talk to the liaison officer a little bit later in the panel discussion and talk about other ways that we keep kids safe. The second thing is creating a culture a healthy culture. And how we do that is we build relationships with students. We make sure that they feel welcome, that they belong. We do that through just very intentional connections with each and every child. So we hire teachers that are truly experts in how to express care to an 11-year-old. There's a skill and a strategy in doing that. So we make sure when we hire teachers that they have that skill. They know how to appropriately express care to students. They know how to challenge them. How do we challenge their growth? Make sure that they are going to be growing and do that in an appropriate way. We support them when they need support. We share power with them, so they become owners of their own education. And then finally, we try to expand their possibilities so that we give them opportunities to grow and do things that they never dreamt they could do before. So in doing that, we create a culture that is very healthy and really promotes growth. Also, we want to make sure that we stay focused. And so we want to make sure that everything we are doing is relevant. In other words, it's important. We follow the Minnesota State standards. We make sure that the practices that we use in the schools are all very important and relevant to early adolescence. Keeping in mind what's important to us as adults usually is a priority for 11 to 12-year-olds, but it might be slightly different. And so we cater to their developmental needs. Fourth, we want to make sure as an 11-year-old or a 12-year-old that this is engaging. What's interesting and engaging to an 11 or 12-year-old might be different than would it be if you or I were in a classroom. So we have, again, experts in how to make things interesting and engaging to 11 and 12-year-olds. And then finally, when all these things are in place, we can challenge them. And we challenge them to grow beyond what they ever dreamt they could do. So that is the 5 keys, and it really is to every school that you'd walk into. What makes middle school unique is that we have the whole child approach of an elementary. If you were to ask an elementary teacher, what do you teach? They will tell you something like, well, I teach 2nd graders, I teach 3rd graders, I teach 5th graders, or I teach 6th graders. Their training really conditions them to look at the whole child, and they're teaching the child. The content is very, very important, but their primary focus tends to be the whole child. Now, much of our 6th grade has that training as far as the whole child education. If you were to go to a high school and you ask the very same question to teachers, they would say, I teach biology, I teach math. Or they might even be as specific as saying, I teach U.S. history and I teach AP history. They're very content focused. It doesn't mean that they don't care about the individual. I know them personally, and I know that they do care very much about each and every student that they have. But their training conditions them to be focused on the academic part of the equation. Now think about middle school. It's that time in between where we have to really accommodate both and blend that fine balance between really meeting the needs of the whole child and also meeting the needs of academic rigor. It's a fine balance, and what we'll find tonight is that we have some very specific strategies to address that. So finally, as we move down this journey, and you're going to hear a lot of information that we're going to share with you tonight, none of which will be the only time you'll hear it. You'll have plenty of opportunities between now and the start of 6th grade to get this information again. You can have opportunities to ask questions. But here's what I want you to do. I want you to think about what you know, the things that you shared with the person next to you. And as you hear us talk this evening, I want you to think about what confirms your thinking. That's exactly what I thought. That confirms what my thought was. I also want you to say, or think about, what conflicts with my thinking? What is, that's not at all what I thought, and I kind of disagree with that. So that's, I think, important to identify what are those things that conflict with your thinking. And then finally, what's the information that you're going to hear tonight that really challenges your thoughts? Boy, I never thought of it that way before, and I think you're right. I might want to know more about it, but I like that. So I want you to think in those terms. Have those questions at the forefront of your mind as you hear the panel speak tonight. And then I think you'll have opportunities to ask questions. And so those might generate some of those questions. So I'm now going to pass it down to Ms. Jaeger, and she'll tell you a little bit about the classrooms.
Thank you, Paul. I'm Jill Jaeger. I have been with Wayzata this is my 27th year, and I've only ever taught 5th grade and 6th grade. You'll find that many of our 6th grade teachers are actually elementary teachers at heart, and most of us have elementary licenses. I have an elementary license. I can teach first grade through 6th grade. And so that transitional period between 5th grade and 6th grade is right where I like to be. That's where I've spent my career. I also have had a couple of my own daughters come through the system. They came through here at Central Middle School and on to the high school, and one's about to graduate from St. Catherine University, and one's getting her feet wet at UMD. So we've done okay so far. Paul was talking a lot about how we get kids ready to be the best students they can be as we try to teach the child. That's one of the things that as sixth grade teachers and seventh and eighth grade teachers collaborate on is we often talk about making these kids as successful middle school kids that they can be. Yeah, you know, we teach the content. I happen to teach social studies. It's Minnesota history in sixth grade, and I love teaching that. It's my passion. But really what I'm teaching is the kid walking through the door. We want to make sure that a big school, such as like Central or East or West, feels small. It's true, we've got a lot of kids, somewhere around 1,200 here at Central. But when it really boils down to it, we put our kids into smaller teams. So when your students come to any one of our middle schools, they'll be in a smaller area, grouped up with 3 or 4 core teachers, and during that time, their lockers are also pretty close to where their core classes are as well. So they don't travel very much throughout a whole big building such as this. We're really very aware of traffic patterns, and oftentimes the first few days of sixth grade, the kids are really nervous about how am I getting to my classes, and how do I know where to go? Well, you'll have a lot of opportunities before that first day of school. You'll get to come this spring and get a chance to come around, walk the buildings, kind of a self-guided tour, and get to meet some of the sixth grade teachers that'll be in the 3 middle schools. You'll get a chance again to visit us in the fall, where we have more open house, more of a formal curriculum night. In between then, you can also contact the school with any of the questions that you have. So if you leave tonight and you have lingering questions or you're still not really sure, please know that you'll have an opportunity to interact with the schools and interact with any of us multiple times coming up. But as I mentioned, the teachers are grouped into what we call teams, and that helps to make a big school feel small. For example, on my team, we have a math, a social studies, a science, and a language arts teacher. And our team works very closely with roughly 100, 120 students, and we're responsible for those 120. I'm not sure how it happens, but I feel like the beginning part of my career when I was in the elementary school, I taught at Greenwood, I had roughly 25, 30 kids most of the years I was there. And now that I'm here in the middle school, I really know my 120. And you get to know them because every minute that I spend here is getting to know those kids. We really believe as teachers that without a relationship, learning can't take place. If I don't get to know your students, they're not going to really participate in what I've got going on in the classroom. So making those connections are number one important. During the day, your kids will also get a chance to visit encore teachers, and those are your specialists like art, music, ETD, that's woodshop for the rest of us that have gone through the system a little bit. And those classes really open up their eyes to other things that might be possibilities of some interest areas to them. One of the things I wanted to make sure that we kind of take a quick look at is a possible or an example schedule. Now in 8th grade, where Corey teaches, his schedule might look a little bit different, but this is pretty common to a 6th grade schedule. We might have anywhere from 45, 50, 50-minute classes, and in between there'll be some passing time where they get to go out to their lockers and say hi to their friends, maybe get a chance to visit the restroom or a drinking fountain, and we'll get right back into the next class. Now, when your students come in August, and even in September when the first couple of days of school start, we walk them all over these buildings. We give them tours, we take them to their encore classes, we make sure that first week or two they know exactly where they're going and their shortest distance to get there. But the nice part about it is that our administrators do a really great job at scheduling 7th grade and 8th grade at times when we're in the hallway, they're not. So when you're walking down the hallway as just a little 6th grader and you look up to some of those big 8th grade kids, you rarely pass each other in the hallway. So that's really nice with traffic flow. As you work throughout your day, there'll be a time where the kids can all get together at lunch and see some of the friends who may not be on their team. They'll also cross paths with each other in their encore classes, which again are their art, music, ETD, Spanish. So even if your student may not be on the same team, as one of their best friends or one they've been with for many years, have no fear, they'll see a friendly face later on. Do you want to talk anything about the 8th grade schedule? Is it pretty similar, Corey?
I mean, overall, the 8th grade schedule, and I would guess I'd step back. Each building has a slightly different take on this, and so your 6th grader who's going to East or West might not have this exact thought on that, but it does give you the general idea of all 3 grade levels.
Perfect, thank you. One thing you might notice up there is, period of advisory and a period of flex time towards the end of the day, and that really does vary between teams and the schools. For example, in my advisory class, which is kind of my home room, we'll spend part of that time during that moment working on silent reading and spending some time really getting into a favorite book of their own. But we also take that time to build community and work on some team building activities. We get to know each other's names. We also start to find connections with one another by exploring some of the things that we might have in common. We work on our Trojan pride skills when we look at building empathy within our students, being prepared, working on those skills that make them the best middle school kids they can be. During the flex time in the afternoon, again, that can vary from team to team or even building or even in the grade level. And some of that time is often used for kids to get extra help, have some work time so they can practice some of their independent skills and some of their time management skills. Also could be a time where we might pull our team together for a fun activity. So that flexible time gives an opportunity for your students to connect with another teacher if they have questions, if they've been absent, or just need some extra support in a class. It's also important to know that here at the middle schools, we continue to have programs that your kids might be benefiting from as the time was spent in elementary school, such as special ed or Vision 21. Also opportunities for all kids to take the next step and challenge themselves with an extension. Our Vision 21 teachers is leading a book group right now for anybody who was involved, or anybody who was interested, whether they had scored a high enough score on one of their previous tests to be involved with Vision or not. So there's lots of opportunities to challenge themselves and get involved with things. Which brings me a little bit to intramurals. One of my favorite things about middle school is this is the time where your kids get to try different things. Now, my kid's not real tall. She's a pretty short kid. 8th grade, get this going again. 8th grade was the time she got to try volleyball. Now, her very tall friend plays volleyball very competitively, but for a short year, those two could play together, and she loved it. She also was involved with the play for 3 years, and when she went into high school, those are things she didn't continue. But anytime your kids can get involved with an after-school activity, try it. See if you like it. There's clubs for all kinds of activities, sports, even some after-school interest areas that they might want to just try out and see if they can connect with other kids that they might spend their time with. We can try that a little bit. Thank you. I'm going to talk one more thing. Lunch. Who's ready for lunch? Any of those kids out there looking forward to middle school lunch? That's right. Lunch is awesome. I eat school lunch almost every day. I eat better here than if I were to pack a lunch at home. Culinary Express does a great job, and they provide a really good, healthy, balanced lunch. In fact, you can grab all the salad and vegetables you want. Aren't you looking forward to that? Yeah, right. One thing that we also offer is a la carte. And so as we move in towards the beginning of the year, and we'll talk more at open house sometimes, make sure that you're also having a conversation about nutrition and healthy choices, because we have an a la carte that provides all kinds of things that are treats to really healthy options. And so that's going to be something that we're going to need to work with each other, the teachers, my students, and yourselves, to make sure you balance those choices that the kids have. We're really looking forward to building some kids that have organizational skills, independence, and some self-monitoring skills as they move into being able to tackle some of the content that we also teach here at the middle school. I'm going to turn this over to my friend Corey and see if he can add a little bit more to what I'd already said, but sure. See if you can do it. But thanks for all coming tonight.
All right. I'm Corey. I teach at East. And I want to kind of start my spiel with a thank you to you as parents. Lindsay said at the beginning that her kids come in and see me. One of the things that drives me as a teacher or a person who works with kids is not only that relationship with kids, but frankly, I've gotten close to some of the families over the years, and I laugh with Lindsay, who once in a while we text now, and I'm like, hey, I'm coming over for dinner, and she thinks I'm kidding. I'm not. One day I'll be there. So thank you for that partnership. I would add a couple things just to what Jill said. And one of the things I would add is middle school is this great time to give you the opportunity as parents to maybe step back sometimes and watch your child develop some of those organizational skills and develop some of those kind of dealing with life skills. It's okay to once in a while step back, as hard as it might be, and let them kind of fail a little bit. Not for a long time or anything, but just to let them feel that sensation too, because it's important as we grow to learn how to deal with and learn from those experiences. Also that, continuing that theme, always as a teacher, I love it when parents contact me, and I certainly reach out to you as a teacher, and I know the teachers in 6th and 7th grade do a great job of that. But if you have questions, or you're like, I don't know if what my child is telling me is 100% accurate, because I don't know if you know this, but middle schoolers give you like an edited version of what happened. I don't know if you know that, but just warning. So by all means, we love to have contact with you via, email or calling us, and I think that really helps to keep us on the same page. So, what else was I going to be talking about? Well, let me go forward. So, we already addressed a little bit about the teens in the classrooms, but like Jill said, your children will be on teens, and that's that smaller group, and they'll be with those teachers for generally a year in 8th grade. Some of them is a semester class, but it really develops that I get to know them and they get to know me. And so a typical classroom looks very different. You walk into my classroom where I'm not so sure about the, Paul mentioned the temperature control. I think you walk into the polar vortex when you go into my room, it's pretty cold. Just, you might want to note that, Paul. Okay. But the typical classroom really varies from place to place. And so don't be surprised. This might be a classroom your child is in. You might be in a different style classroom. And that, again, builds kind of the ability of students to adapt to new environments and change into who they are becoming. All right, what is a typical middle school student? That is a great question that has no real good answer. Sometimes middle schoolers walk in and I'm like, are you in this school? Like, I'm not quite sure if they're a 6th grader. And they're like, yeah, I'm in 8th grade. I'm like, oh, welcome. There is no typical middle school child. This is an age where kids are changing rapidly. They're developing emotionally, socially, physically. And so middle school kids look and act different. In fact, they might come home one day and be so excited about something, and then you're like, this is awesome. And they come home the next day and you're like, tell me about that exciting thing yesterday. And they're like, lame. And you're like, what happened? This was so great. And so kids are going to change. And that's a natural, normal part of middle school. Oh, we have some quotes from students. Here's some advice that students would like to give you. I'm not going to read all of these, but there are things that we've talked about. See the building before middle school starts. If in middle school, oftentimes teachers are in during the summer working. If you happen to see one of us, it doesn't matter if I'm an 8th grade teacher. If I see a 6th grade family, I'll talk to you. I'll show you around. I'll talk. It's a great time. I'll give you just a second to read these quotes up here, just from other people who have gone through middle school. I hate this mic. I'm changing. Okay, thank you. Can you hear me now? Okay. Older people in the audience get that, right? Right, okay. All right, grading. And I will start the conversation, and Jill and Paul, by all means, jump in. We in the middle school, a couple of years ago, moved to a grading for learning system. The good news is it's very similar to what you've experienced in elementary school. How many of you went through middle school and high school with the A, B, C, D, F system, all right? Okay, you're even under that? We went away. We moved away from that system because it was rigid and didn't serve all of our students. And so now, very similar to elementary, we use a 4-3-2-1. At the elementary, it's like PASS, PES, that kind of grading system. It's the same thing with numbers. We look at where's the standard that the state sets out for us, and how is your child progressing towards the standard. So the good news is, in the beginning of the semester, or the beginning of the year, it is perfectly normal for children to get a 1 or a 2. That's okay, especially in the 6th grade. There's a whole lot of transition going on. That's an okay thing. They're experiencing new things. They're not going to be proficient on a standard that's designed to be assessed in April and May. So the other thing grading for learning really allows us to do is allows us to give you feedback based on assessment. Homework is critical to success, but it doesn't really have a place in the grade as far as how are you doing in regards to the standards. Just think if the standard is, can you jump 10 feet? And we say, well, the homework you didn't do any of your homework, but you can jump 10 feet. We're going to give you a 1. That doesn't make much sense because you can meet the standard. So homework is vitally important to reaching the standard, but it is not going to factor into the actual assessment of the standard. So Paul, Jill, or anyone else want to?
I think that was a good introduction. Just a little background knowledge on grading for learning. So the grading system and assessment system has always been very complex in education. If we go back many, many years, Yale University was the first educational institution to assign a grade. Back then, the grade had everything to do with the economic situation of the family. So if your family came with resources, you had a better grade than a child who did not. That's a sort of documented fact. So as we evolved in the whole idea of education in the United States, we saw that there's a direct connection between your education and the type of life that you live as an adult. And so they began to say, well, we need to have different types of people that supports our economy. And it's really interesting to watch as you look at grading and educational opportunity, how that follows economic need. So that at the time, and this is really talking now about the turn of the century, that we needed a small group of people to be visionaries and leaders. We needed a large group of people to be skilled labor. And then we needed another fairly large, but maybe smaller group to be manual labor. That worked really well. So we noticed, or a couple of different fields, noticed that there's this idea of a normal distribution curve in any sort of human task, that you can follow a norm curve. So a small number of people do extremely well in any given task. About an equal number of people fail at that task. There's a little larger group that does pretty good at that task, and about an equal number that really struggles with that task. The majority of us fall in the middle, and that we can definitely do a task, but we may have some limitations in doing that. So using that model, we came up with the idea of grading on the curve. And so a small number of people would get the A's, and that's that small number that was exceptional. A little larger group would get B's, that means you're really good at it. The average student would get a C, and so forth. So that worked beautifully. There's an economist by the name of Pillsbury that wrote a long essay about why we need that. And it worked well for the time. But as time went on, we noticed that there isn't a normal distribution of human talent. And so if we went strictly on a curve, we could have a situation, which we do have in this school district, as a matter of fact, that more than the 2.5% that are typically in that 2 standard deviations and the extent of that curve are performing in that area. So there's more of us in this district that should be getting the opportunities to move forward with what we'd call the A grade. So we went to something called a percentage. And so if we identified the tasks, and we said, if you get a certain percentage right, when we add up all of the tasks that you do over time, then you will get an A. If you don't, you get a B. And then you get the C and D and F respectively. And opportunity then follows those grades. So if you get the best grades, you get greater opportunity for further education. If you get average grades, you might have opportunities, but maybe not the same opportunity as the higher grades. And if you get the failing grades or the lower grades, then you would get put out into society to do some of the lower paying jobs. So now let's come up to our current time. The purpose of education has changed. So our charge used to be sort the students into those categories and provide opportunities for those who deserve that in the minds of the people that were using that system at the time. Now we see that there are skills that all people are required to have to really function well in society. And those are fairly complex skills. So outcomes in about, is when I kind of entered the profession in the mid to late 80s. Yeah, that kind of dates me. But anyway, before you guys were born, I was engaged in this whole thing called outcome-based education. Outcomes-based education was really about defining exactly what we want all students to learn. For the first time ever, they started using the term all students. It wasn't some students, it was all students. And so we defined, here are the things that we want as outcomes. Now really, because of a limitation of technology, that was a very difficult thing to implement back then. As technology has advanced, it has done two things. One, it has really magnified the need for all people, all citizens, to have some pretty complex skills. It has also opened the opportunity for us to have more sophisticated ways of assessing talent and being very specific in being able to quantify large sums of data. So we now are using we saw the fault of averaging in this process. When you take a number of grades and you average them, it gives a skewed kind of sense of how you are performing at this moment. So we now use a system called Grading for Learning, which looks at a standard. So the Minnesota State standards, or whatever standards we're using for any course, should define exactly what are the outcomes. And when we do assessments based on those standards. Now what we are looking at is, as you leave the course, what's your level of performance? So it's possible that you walk into a course, know very little or have very little skill in that particular course. But through the course, we do something called teach and learn. And in that process, some students can have tremendous success. They leave the course with a tremendously high level of mastery. So they are now going to be assigned the appropriate mark that reflects that level of mastery. So I think I could go on, so I'm going to try to truncate this. So Lindsay has heard this before. So I'm going to conclude with this. Many of our kids are very capable of going beyond the standard. So there's definitely an emphasis in Wayzata to make sure that we give opportunities for kids to exceed the standards. And you'll get more on this later, but the scale is this. We give a 1 means that you're attempting this skill, but you're struggling with it. A 2, if you see a 2, it means you're approaching the skill, but you're not there yet. A 3 means that you've accomplished the standard. So a 3 is that you have mastered that standard. A 4 means you've exceeded that standard. I guess I said the last thing before, but I'm going to add one more thing. There's something called a Jaeger profile that exists within all of us. There's not a single person in this room that is good at everything. So if you look at all the different skills that there are in life, that you would see a very jagged profile. And I'll use one example, and I'll just use myself. There was a time in my life, believe it or not, that I had this goal. The goal was that on the same day that I could bench press 400 pounds, I was going to run a 4-hour marathon. That was my goal. Well, I actually got to the point where I could lift a lot of weight. That's kind of my talent. I can lift stuff. But guess what? I can't run very well. And so I never reached that goal. But you can see that that was my jagged profile. I'm really naturally very good at lifting things. I'm not very good at sustaining by running for a long period of time. So I struggled with that running part. As a matter of fact, I never reached that. I never exceeded proficiency with that. So, but that is my profile, and that is something that is important for me to know about myself. So you take any aspect of your life, and that's what we're trying to provide, is really accurate feedback on your child's performance at this point in their life. It helps them to focus. If there's areas where they need to improve, it helps them to focus their attention. And if there's areas that they exceed, we know that those are your strengths, and those are some things that you can pursue and really reach tremendous levels of expertise. So there's maybe a long-winded explanation of grading for learning, but you passed me the mic, so I'll blame you.
I learn something new every time. Thank you for that. I think next we'll send it on down to you, Rose, if you're ready to talk a little bit more about your role. And I'd like to introduce Officer Rose Lee.
Hi there, everybody. My name is Officer Rose Lee. I am a police officer with the Wayzata Police Department. I currently work at Wayzata Middle School West. If you're going to East or Central, you will have a Plymouth officer in your school, and I believe it will still be Melissa Johnson, and she's awesome, so she'll be good for you. Advance the slide here just once. So I am in the school 3 days a week, and then my other 2 days are spent in investigations at my police department, and our offices are a block from West, so if they do need me, I can stop in and help out with whatever they need. My role is to basically be a liaison kind of between the police department and the school, and there is more of a support role. I'm not necessarily there as like an officer role for discipline or anything like that. If something does happen that's a crime, that's where I kind of take ownership of that, and I go into the role of police officer instead of the support staff. I do work all 3 lunches, so 6th, 7th, 8th grade, I'm there as the support, and I take them out. We do have recess at West. I don't know how it works at East and Central, but I do take the kids out there and monitor them. I'm also, the main priority is safety, so I make sure that the entrances are secure and that people are only going in one entrance. I work with school staff and to do building safety plans and other types of drills that we want to make sure we understand, and I help them write that. But yeah, I do work with a lot of the different types of staff, and I get to know the students really well, and sometimes if someone's too busy to talk to them, they'll come down to my office, and we'll just sit and have a chat for a half hour till we can get them the help that they need. So definitely, if you guys are coming to West, I am there next year as my last year, but I am there to help you, and you can stop by my office. I'm right in student services.
Hi, everyone. My name is Annie Rader, and I am a new school counselor here at Central this year. And I point that out because, like you will be going through this transition next year, I am currently in it, and I can say it has done very well. And the teachers do everything they can to make sure people are comfortable, know where they're going, and are ready to learn. So that's been a cool experience. I also could be sitting in the audience with you all right now because my oldest will be a 5th grader this year at West. And so I think I kind of wear a couple of interesting hats in connecting with the kids at this point in their educational journey. So as far as the schools breakdown, we're pretty similar in what we do. Much like your elementary schools, we have social workers in all 3 of the buildings. The social workers each have a grade at each building, and they also are responsible for the students who have IEPs or who are in special education. In addition to that, here at Central, we have 2 school counselors. I'm one, and yours coming up next year will be Amy Largent. And at East, yours next year will be Debbie Kimlinger. And then at West next year, it'll be Amy K, or Amy Konjolka, Mrs. K as the kids call her there. At East and at West, both of the counselors are also in charge of 504 plans. And then here at Central, our Dean of Students, Rob Remington, is in charge of 504 plans and also helps with discipline. The nice thing about all 3 buildings is that whomever you start with as your counselor or your social worker, that is who will loop with you. And I just think that's a fabulous model because we will get to know your students very well. We will follow them. we will be a part of their teams each year as they move through the middle school. So I think that's positive. So our role is similar to probably what the social worker's role is at the elementary school, and then some. We work directly with the students. The students are like our clients. They are our people, and we are here to help them in this journey. But it doesn't stop there. We work with them individually. We work in small groups. Oftentimes we'll go into the classrooms at the beginning of the year, kind of introducing ourselves, letting the kids know what we do, how they can access us, how we can help support them here. We also work very collaboratively with the teacher teams. So we meet with the teams regularly in a way that we can be kind of behind the scenes working to support, to say, what are you seeing? What are the needs? What kinds of interventions might we put in place? How can I help support from my office? And so we work really closely together. And so parents, that is one of my favorite pieces about this middle school model, because we are talking about your kids, we are aware of things that are going on, and we are aware of their needs and how to help support. Though I mention your students as our clients, we also take it very seriously to partner with you at home. And kind of as Corey mentioned, kind of bridging that and building that relationship is such an important piece, because your child may come home and have one perspective. Teachers may know of some other things that are going on. I may know of some different things as well, and clearly you know your student best. And so to be able to kind of build that relationship and partnership is really key in helping them grow here. I think we all see our role as one to advocate for our students. And so for me, I like to be visible. I like to be out in the hallways. I like to be in the lunchroom. I like to be in passing time and greeting them as they come in the door and saying goodbye when they leave. But a piece of that is so they recognize that they have people who are here, much like their teachers. They've got their administrators and they've got us. And I think thinking of the transition of the comfort of an elementary school, I just think that's a pretty powerful thing to know you've got a lot of people on your side. Some of the things that students may experience and as places where they can be learning and growing over these next 3 years, you'll see up here. And I think as Paul introduced, the context of the great amount of change that these young people will be going through biologically, intellectually, morally, socially, emotionally, over these years. I think as parents, if you can keep that in the context of all of this, I think it's going to help that journey. Peer relationships are so important. Developmentally, what these young people are going to be going through is trying to figure out how they fit in socially and who they are and what their identity is. And so peer relationships become even more important than what you've seen. And sometimes that comes a little bit at the expense of backing away from families. And that's normal, and that's okay. That doesn't mean you back away. That means you keep the communication going and be open to understanding that this is a piece of what they're going through. I think another thing that we see, especially early on, is learning how to manage school and manage the extracurriculars. The expectation is that this becomes more of their role, less of your role, but it also is kind of tricky. And so many of our students are learning a lot more about the new academic level and the expectations, but they also are managing things that they're doing outside of school. So talking with them about things like, how much time do you have this week, and what are the nights that you know you're going to be able to spend more time or less time, and kind of talking through how to manage all that and help them, I think, will be beneficial. That goes in line with organization, and they're going to be learning many new things, ways to be organized. They'll still continue to have planners like you have at the elementary school. They'll have iPads where Canvas calendar is going to become very important, and you'll have many more opportunities to learn about that as parents. They'll be checking Skyward more often. The flex time, I know, is a really key place where you can encourage your students to really be finding out, what do I need to take home with me tonight? How much time will it take? How should I turn it in? If I have questions, how do I ask those questions? So the organization is a piece that's going to become really integral to their education. As far as communication, I just think if you can model good, strong communication with your kids now, I think that's going to be something that's helpful. Whether it's encouraging them to seek out help from a teacher, ask questions, that's one thing, but also to be paying attention to their their body language and their nonverbal communication. What is it that they're not saying to you? And how might you open the lines of communication to just be asking questions and to really listen intently? Because I think, especially as a counselor here, sometimes I have kids leave my office and say, man, you're a good listener. Thankfully, that's a response I get, but I know that that's something that they're also craving from you, is just simply to listen. Impulsivity is another thing that we run into, is just learning how to control their bodies, control themselves, not blurt out in class, give someone else a chance to finish speaking. Those are some things that are just kind of typical behaviors that they're learning to fine-tune and grow. And then lastly, the managing emotions kind of fits in with all of this. I think if you remember back to your years of this time, it can be quite a roller coaster, and you can be feeling really happy one moment and terribly sad the next. Or you can have everything together, and then you have a night where you need to stay up till 12 o'clock in tears because you don't have a project finished. Just know that a piece of your role at home is helping them figure out how to manage this, and that it's normal, and that they're not alone. So maybe a little bit of what I've talked about is how can you help at home? I think one thing is just to encourage balance. Encourage your kids, not only to spend time on academics and studying and the school piece, but also getting outside, finding a way to exercise, getting sleep. Kids this age, they still say need on average 8.5 to 10, maybe even more hours of sleep per night. So that's a great thing that you can help encourage. Spending time with friends, trying out new activities. So any way you can encourage them to find balance in those things. At the same time, I think it's also important to be able to set limits and be clear about your expectations. And that can involve anything such as homework time. We do it at this time if we can, at an evening in this particular place, technology free. If you want to set limits, we really strongly feel that it's important to say, phones are off at a certain point, not in your bedroom. We know that there are some pieces to, like social media, we're finding studies that say 2 hours or more is a significant correlation to kids who are having higher rates of depression, or the blue light from a phone or an iPad is something that decreases melatonin. And so it's okay for you as parents to start early and to just say, we're not going to have it in our bedrooms, or to even talk with or friendship groups, and as parents to decide we're not going to let our kids be on their phones past a certain time of night. So it's a good time to set limits and enforce those and be consistent with that sort of thing. We talked a little bit already about modeling strong communication, and I think that's key. Corey talked about experiencing real life consequences, and I think this is really actually a safe and okay time for that. They may forget something at home, and it may be a big deal to them especially, but it's also a great time for them to learn what it feels like to have not had what they needed to have, and then how to handle that afterwards and pick up the pieces. Lastly, as far as how can you help as parents, I know sometimes there's this feeling of, I felt very connected at elementary school, and now I feel less so now that my kids are going to middle school. Please know that is not what we're looking for. If you have information about your young child, if you have things that you think the teachers need to know, if you have questions about what is happening, we, especially as counselors and social workers, encourage you to call and let us know and kind of partner with us. We can support them better the more that we are kind of working together. Just briefly, I think it's important, obviously, from the work that I do, to take a look at the mental health side of this. And I think as we talk about open communication, with your kids, I think it's okay to open the discussion about mental health and to normalize the discussion about that and make that a piece of things that you talk about. It will happen that you'll see mood swings. It will happen that your kids will have periods of sadness, and that's normal. It will happen that kids are stressed and worried at times, and that's also normal. But what you want to caution and look out for is, as parents, if you see significant changes, and if you see sleep patterns changing, or eating patterns, or things that seem outside of the norm, that's when I would say, maybe involve someone like myself or one of the social workers or your pediatrician or someone if you have concerns. Just be watchful for those things, because because it's typical to have some nerves and it's typical to have some stress, but if it seems like it's out of character for your young one, then that's when it would be a good idea to involve others. And as counselors and social workers, we have lots of different resources that we can share. We have lots of different places we can refer people. And so hopefully you're getting the sense that we're approachable and that you can let us know if you have questions about that sort of thing.
All right, I'm going to talk about a couple more things and then we'll take some questions. The first thing I'm going to talk about are parent-teacher conferences. Just like in elementary school, there's an opportunity for you to come in and meet your child's teachers. It happens twice a year at the middle school in October and February or early March, right around there. And the current format we're kind of looking at right now because we really want to be able to deliver the best and most effective conference for you. But as it stands right now, next year I would guess we're going to continue with the opportunity just for you to come in, hear about our course. But what we really love as a teacher, what I really love is the students to come in with parents. It's an opportunity then to have a more meaningful conference because then kids can be part of what you would say. Because as I tell kids, I will tell you the exact same thing that I will tell your parents. Like I'm not going to sugarcoat it or make it any better. It's just, I'm going to be real with you. So you do it through Skyward, and that is conferences. There's a time difference because unlike in elementary school where they get a 20-minute conference, here you usually conference in a shorter amount of time. But we still try and convey to you the very important information. And we want to hear from you. What do we need to do to help meet your child's learning needs? And then finally, anything to add, Jill?
No, I think it's just really important to mention also that we want to make sure we make connections with you very much early on and often, not waiting until the time for conferences. So that when we do meet face-to-face for conferences, that's just an opportunity for the conversation to continue.
Absolutely. And then lastly, iPads. Yes, in middle school, we go to one-to-one iPads, which means your child will have an iPad that they will bring home, they will do homework on. Here's the things about iPads. They are an incredible tool. Like, I don't know, I was thinking about this the other night as I was watching a TV show, and they were talking about something. I'm like, ooh, what is that? I went to Wikipedia. Like, I have instant knowledge. I don't know if it's right or not, but I had instant knowledge. But there's an incredible tool. That said, we strongly encourage you, I'm just going to kind of highlight, by all means, charge them in a common place or in a parental bedroom or something where these things can also become distracting. So by all means, as parents or as people who are watching children, supervising children, don't be afraid to be like, you're done at 9 o'clock or 8 o'clock or 7 o'clock. It's good to have time where kids go outside and play and have fun. So definitely want to encourage that. It's an incredible tool, but again, keep the lines of communication open and continue with letting us know if there's something we can do to meet your child's needs. Jill?
Just wanted to add that we will have an opportunity in August when you guys come to pick up your iPads, and there'll be much more information and details regarding how that iPad's going to be used in the classroom and how you can best manage it as well. So more information's coming about those. So we want to make sure we get a chance to turn it over to questions. So we really appreciate you hanging with us while we tried to cover as much as we could. Thank you.
Okay, a couple of things. First of all, you guys got little cards to be able to ask questions. So we have people that are going to go around and collect your questions so that they can bring them up to me and we'll ask those questions. Additionally, I guess there's so many of you, which is so exciting, but we didn't have enough of the handouts. So if on your question cards, if you can also, if you didn't get a handout, give us your email. We'll email you the handout. So that would be another way of getting the handout. So while we're getting questions collected, I will start with a question. Every one of the middle schools has a night coming up in March where you'll all get to go to your individual middle school to have a little bit more detail about each school. Can you guys give us a little preview of that night?
So the orientation meeting occurs I believe it's right after spring break this year. So you'll be invited, as Lindsay said, to this school. And the most important thing is getting into the building. So if I can emphasize one thing that you can do for your child in preparation for middle school is as frequently as possible, get them to the building, let them experience being there. And so you're also going to get, much like tonight, a lot of information about the middle school. You'll get a few dates that you're going to want to take note of. But again, it's just another opportunity to hear some of this information. It's a way for you to meet the people that will be working with your child, and again, just a chance to be in the building. I should also add, prior to that, we'll be visiting the students in their elementaries, so they'll see us in their elementary setting before that night.
Okay. Another thing that I wanted to say in response to a couple of the things you guys had brought up earlier, one of the discussion topics had been making sure that the kids get a chance to learn their own organization and experience a chance to fail. Middle school can be scary, and it's a new experience for you guys, but it's also a way for them to sort of get used to what's going to happen later in life. So those of us that have kids that are in college and have been in the high school, those classes start to count, right? So middle school is a little step forward towards that, and if they don't learn how to fail there, or if they don't learn how to be the person who's in charge of themselves in middle school, if they don't learn that before they get to high school, it's a very hard lesson to learn in high school. And so it's easy to hear that from the teachers. It's a harder thing to hear from a parent. So it's okay for them to learn that they didn't bring their lunch, or they didn't bring that assignment, or they didn't do something that they were supposed to do and have to work through those consequences in middle school. It's a great safety net there, because when they don't do it in high school, there's a lot less safety net and recourse. So learn it in middle school, maybe not in 6th grade, but by the time they're through 8th grade, right? So don't be afraid of that. When do they get their schedules?
I guess I can talk some more. Okay.
So
the schedules, we are working on schedules really through July. So in early August, there'll be an opportunity to see them online, but also we invite you to come into the school during August. It's a little bit different at each middle school in terms of the date, but come on in, you'll get a paper copy of your schedule, you'll get a chance to go to your locker, open up your locker, go walk around the building and find all your classrooms. I mean, once again, get the layout of the school with the relevancy of your schedule. So I think that's an important time. So to answer your question, beginning of August.
I think so. So then for parents who are work, the change in our schedule for the middle schoolers that start obviously later than the other two schools, what options are available for parents that are going to go to work early in the day and have their middle schoolers getting on the bus later? What options are there for them as far as getting their kids to school earlier?
Sure, I can comment what we do here at Central Middle School, and starting as, I think as early as about 7:45, our cafeteria is open and available for kids to arrive, and they can go right into the cafeteria. They can work on their homework, explore other options. They can play some, card games. They can talk to have a conversation, talk to their friends, and they'll hang out there until our first bell rings at 8:50. And during that time, the a la carte portion of our cafeteria is open for some breakfast types of foods that they can purchase with their Culinary Express account. So we do have a location here in the cafeteria where it is monitored with staff, and they can hang out there until the school day starts.
And I know East is the same, West is also, okay.
Okay.
So there we have that. question about how teams are established. So we talked about how to make the middle schools seem less daunting. Every school separates each of the grades into teams. How are the teams decided?
Okay. So first of all, it's very difficult to predict what team your child's going to be on. So I think in all schools, I think Central's a bit larger, so they may have 3 sixth grade teams. Is that right? 3 teams? We have 4 teams. But at West and East, we are very creative, and our school colors are blue and gold. So we have a gold team and we have a blue team. And then I think Central adds a green team and a silver team.
They are blue, silver, gold, and green.
Okay, so they just give them color names. The concept of the team is that we take 4 or 5 teachers, usually 4 teachers in 6th grade. They each teach a different subject area, and we cluster about 100 students or so with those teachers. And so those 100 students will all have the same teachers, and that creates this smaller kind of grouping and feeling of belonging. How are you assigned to those teams? There are some factors. They have sometimes to do with certain placements in the class, but what we say is we really move away from requests. So let me just share, this happens every summer, and it goes like this. I get a phone call, and the phone call is something like, my child's a little nervous about starting middle school, and the neighbor kid is really good friends with my child. And so if you can, I want those 2 to be on the same team. Do everything you can, because I think it's really important for my child. Okay, thank you very much. I hang up the phone. I get another phone call. It's the mother of the neighbor kid. And the mother says, hey, got a favor to ask of you. There's a kid, the neighbor kid, a real distraction to my child. Can you do everything you can to make sure they're on opposite teams? We don't want to do that. So we've worked very, very hard to make sure that we know that, and standards-based education, or the standards have helped with this, but the experience on each team academically is going to be near identical. And we do, I think, a very good job of hiring the highest quality teachers you will find anywhere across the teams. Now, that being said, we're all human beings. And so sometimes there are adjustments that we make based on maybe personality conflicts, or if there is a history or something, let us know. I will always listen to your situation, but I'll never promise you that I can meet your request. So you're going to have a level of trust that we will develop over time, but there's going to be some initial trust that I will do the best we can for your child. So that's how teams are formed.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So the next 2 questions are going to be sort of polar opposite of spectrum questions, but we all know that all of our learners are not the same. So when we have children that have special needs, so have been historically kids that may need to go to a sensory room or have had paras that help them sort of through their K through 5 experience, or have had special pullouts for certain subjects. How does that work when they get to middle school?
All right. I grabbed the mic just because before I was a communications teacher, I taught special education for about 10 years, and so, and I'm actually a product of the special education system, so it's kind of near and dear to my heart. We get all the IEPs, the 504s that existed in elementary school. Those things continue by law to have to continue in the middle school, but beyond that, the teachers really take a good long look. The case managers for those kids or the 504 coordinator contacts all of us. We get copies of those documents. And I would imagine every single teacher does what I do, and they sit down and they read through that document very carefully. Oftentimes, we will meet with a parent and discuss that, especially I would imagine going into 6th grade and what does that look like, their 6th grade young scholar. So we really do, we have the standards, but we really individualize how we get there for kids. We really want your child to be successful, and I am a huge proponent, and I'm not the only one by any means, that I don't know where your child's going to be at the end of 12th grade. They could be college bound, they could be doing something different, they could be going into the military. I don't know. It's my job as their teacher to get them to reach their highest potential. I am going to push them and work with them individually. And to answer the polar opposite question, I'm guessing, is what do we do to help kids who had gifted needs? Is that the next one?
Yeah, so the next question is, so it's called the Vision program in elementary school. Is it called the same thing, and how does that work?
The what? The VIS program?
Vision.
Yeah.
Yes.
We have Vision 21. It is the Gifted and Talented program, and we have a gifted and talented teacher at each building, and they do a seminar model. Is that consistent? Okay, they do a seminar model where they'll pull kids who qualify and work with them individually. We also have intentional planning during our PLC time, our professional learning communities, where we work with our partners to really enhance the student experience. And what's really great is, as I think Jill talked about earlier, it isn't always just the Vision 21 kids. It's like, you look, this kid has the standard. So we're going to spend 2 weeks. We're not going to waste that child's time. We're going to push them because they have the standard. So we also look at where are they in relation to the standard, and we work really hard as classroom teachers to push them. And now I'll hog the microphone, so I will hand it to anyone else who would like to weigh it.
Okay.
Okay, I won't hand it to Paul, though, because, no.
So the next question is back to electronics. So the district gives each student an iPad. What is the policy about their own iPads, number one, and what is the policy about cell phones?
I'll take that one.
Oh, you got it.
As a 6th grade teacher, we ask our 6th grade teachers, our 6th graders coming in, if they have their own devices, whether it's their own iPad, their own cell phone, that it's locked in their locker. A couple reasons why. We don't need the distraction in the classroom. There is zero need for them to have a cell phone in the classroom, zero. And we want to make sure that it's powered down or on silent and locked in their locker for safety, so that that device doesn't get lost, broken, or unfortunately, sometimes those things get stolen. That happens rarely, especially when they lock it in their locker, and they're really pretty good about that. There's also no need for them to have their own iPad. We provide them a one-to-one iPad that we use as a tool and as a resource in the classroom. And there's special unique features about the iPads that we provide to them, and that is that they are very secured. The filtering system that we have in some sort of invisible shield we have all over us prohibits students from reaching certain websites, or if they're doing Google searches for images related to content, things won't get through that filter. It's pretty tight. And so if they bring in their own iPad, oftentimes those things wouldn't work with our network anyway. They can't log into our network. And if they bring in their own iPads or other devices, then we can't kind of help monitor that a little bit. So they might see content that we don't think is appropriate for them. That being said, their iPads are also set up that you're using them at home for homework or researching, things like that. You also have to log into our system through your home wireless area, so that it also then kind of shoots into the district and then out to the internet, so that those filters are still in place for their own safety. And I hope I've answered that, but I'm a pretty strong stickler that those cell phones are in their lockers.
Yeah.
They don't need them.
Yeah, I would agree. So next question is after-school activities. So a couple of different parts of that. Number one, is there any difference between the three schools as far as after-school activities? Or are they all basically the same? And then the other question is on the sports activities, why are the 6th graders, is there not specific sports for them versus the 7th and 8th graders?
I'm going to pass it to Corey for the 7th and 8th grade answer, and I'll add a little bit about the other question related to activities. A lot of the activities that are offered in each of the 3 schools are very similar, if not the same. But then there are opportunities that a staff member or even a student wants to lead or has an idea for something. For example, I had a student this year that came to me and said, I want to put together a club because a bunch of my friends want to do some strategic games, like playing board games like Risk, and also maybe some chess. So our chess club kind of expanded to include other games that these kids wanted to play. So this student came to us with an idea for an after-school club or a group that was then advertised to everyone in the school that could join. So we oftentimes go off of student ideas, or staff may have a passion that they want to share. I might start a scrapbooking club. Leanne, are you in? Leanne's in. So there's all kinds of things that can be dreamed up, but oftentimes they're very common.
Yes, sports. We have some sports for just 6th grade students, like there's a 6th grade track, there's a 6th grade play, and some of that is separated out based on, and Paul, just make sure I got this right, the Minnesota State High School League has rules around how old you can be when you participate in certain sports, and so that's why some of the sports aren't offered for 6th graders. So, but they will be allowed to do it in 7th and 8th grade.
Excellent. Question about Encore specifically. Are 6th graders required to take band, choir, or orchestra? Is there another option?
I believe the only thing they have in their schedule that's a choice is their music option.
Yeah.
And
they
from
have
what I
to take
understand, it's
any-
either going to be band, orchestra, or choir. And they'll be making that choice here this spring.
Yeah. Okay. How does the school staff help to resolve conflicts on the bus?
I get the fun ones. We believe that the school day starts the moment that they are at the bus stop. So not only on the bus, but bus stops issues are often, we deal with discipline that the technical term is that we can create a nexus to the school. In other words, it has something to do with us. We're not going to deal with the neighborhood dispute on the weekend unless it comes back to school and it continues in the school. We work very closely with First Student. All the buses have video on the buses. We meet with all the drivers. We train them in how to really interact in terms of positive behavioral interventions and supports. We have universal expectations about how the bus ride should go, and they have a referral system that they give us referrals. We deal with them once they get to school, and we deal with them just like we do if a situation happened in school.
Okay. Next one has a couple of different parts as well. How much homework do you anticipate specifically 6th graders would have? And then, though the grades come out at a specific time, as they did in elementary school, how frequently are the grades updated on the specific homework assignments, those kinds of things?
I think on average, your students should expect about an hour or so of homework per night, and that varies quite a bit. There'll be times either closer to assessment time or a time where their project might be due that you might experience more in the evening of your child spending time on some classwork, some homework, or some practice. And that varies so much. As far as, like, I know my math teacher on my team will assign a small amount of practice every single night. And as a social studies teacher, it's just on occasion. So when you think about some time to spend quiet reading, some time taking a look at practicing some of the skills they were working on in school, about an hour. As far as grades, getting into Skyward, that again varies. It depends on how often homework assignment is assigned. It also depends if the assignment is something where we just check off as completed, or if it's an assessment that needs to get into Skyward, that'll take longer for the teacher to spend some time looking over the assessment and providing feedback to your students. I will say we try to get it in as soon as we can, given the opportunities that we have to get that stuff done with some thoughtful work.
I'll just add to that there's a distinction, and this is an important distinction, between a report card and a grade book. Something that's new to this generation is that you as parents now can look into the grade book daily and see real time what's in the grade book. Certainly, when I was in school, that was not an option. So we give out report cards actually twice a year. Once was last week at the end of the semester. The second report card that you'll get is in June at the end of school. In between, there's opportunities for you to look into the grade book. And again, I won't go too long. You're going to get more detail in a grade book than you are in a report card.
Okay, the next question is about snacks and recess. Do they have those?
Yes,
Opportunities.
snacks.
Yes.
Yeah. In my students, and oftentimes in many of the sixth grade classrooms, in the morning when we're silent reading, I allow my kids to bring in a healthy snack. I'm not the person that judges whether the snack is healthy or not. I make sure that they can take care of that and make their own decisions when that time comes. And oftentimes in the afternoon, we'll need a snack as well. Your students may be up pretty early in the morning, and by the time we get to silent reading, it's like 10:30, 10:45, and that is a time where they're getting hungry if they don't eat until 12:30. So I know once or twice a day they can eat a snack. And as far as recess goes, at Central Middle School, we don't have recess, but in the early fall and maybe later in the spring, once it gets nice enough outside, we do try to get them out during that lunch period just to get them outside for some air and some running around. We don't have a playground.
If your child is attending West, we do offer recess. Basically, the first 10 minutes, 15 minutes, whenever they're finished eating, they can either go up to the gym if it's too cold or there's snow on the ground, or we take them out to the yard and they can play soccer, play football, kind of whatever they want out in the free area there. And I'm not sure if the other two middle schools offer it, but I know in the very early morning, starting it's 8:50 till about 9:05, we have morning basketball at West Middle School, so the kids can just basically play basketball until first bell.
That's cool. That's awesome.
So in East recess would be very similar to that. I just wanted to make one comment about snacks. We have an increasingly high number of food allergies in the buildings. And there's a number of dietary needs for students, and they vary greatly. Some students need peanuts in terms of protein during the day. Many students are highly allergic to things like peanuts, tree nuts, dairy, that type of thing. So just have an awareness that if you can avoid peanuts, generally, I would say try to avoid sending peanuts to school. I know that there's varying needs, and many students, many Miller schoolers, do need a snack during the day. Their energy level does drop. It's an important piece, but we have to be aware of the allergies.
Okay, so this is going to be the last question for the night. We didn't get to some of the other questions. If you have specific questions that you'd like to ask tonight, our panelists have been generous with their time and are willing to stay to answer some individual questions. Tonight's presentation also will be, I'm not sure if it's on the district website or on EdTV, but it will be available in the future as well. So our last question is, are the dates for the August move-in times, locker move-in times, et cetera, / orientations available yet? And/or the dates for Wolfridge and Eagle Bluff for next year available yet?
So I'll just address the Environmental Learning Center. The West goes to Eagle Bluff, which is down in Lanesboro. It's a beautiful facility down there. It has kind of a river valley vibe down there, and they go fairly early. I think it's maybe end of September, and I don't know I have the exact date for next year, but it's early on. West or East and Central go to Wolfridge, which is up in Finland, Minnesota. The closest big town is Silver Bay. It's right off of Lake Superior. It's a beautiful place up there as well. Central has, just because of enrollment, they actually have two different trips going up there. One is in January, right after winter break. And then the second trip is, I think it's still going to be in March next year. So it kind of depends. You divide the sixth grade in half at Central. At East, we are going to the third week of January next year. So it's going to be a 5-day trip, Monday through Friday. This year we only could do 4 days because it was at the end of the term. As far as the August dates, they're on the calendar, but to tell you the truth, I wasn't prepared for that one, so I don't have the exact dates. We will be posting them. It's usually the 2 weeks before school starts, and that might vary from school to school. So I'll just tell you, at East, it's 2 weeks before school starts. At that time, we will be taking pictures of your students. For the Life Touch will be there. They'll be getting their lockers, getting their schedules. You'll be able to sign up for various, bring your checkbooks for fees and that type of thing. So we'll take your money.
Thank you very much, everybody, for attending and for helping us with our panel, and we'll see you next year.